Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
John, remember when we talked about Billie Jean, the 13 important things you have to, 13 rules of success in life? Remember we talked about that?
I do remember that.
Rule number 3 is everything is my fault. And everything is my fault. That's why we weren't here yesterday. So I apologize about no show yesterday. We're back today.
We are back today, and you can check out our archives on YouTube. Now, Brad, you probably know this, but bjshow.co is not up and running. Egbert.com is not up and running. But I'm sure at some point in the future, we're going to get those back up and running, I'm sure.
John, don't tell me that. Seriously?
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
Westplex 107.1 was down 2 days ago, and that was back up yesterday. And BJ Show, I went in to edit it yesterday, and it's down, and Egbert.com is down.
Oh, crap.
They say site is disabled.
Okay.
But hey, we got plenty of time, Brad. Folks that are listening live are with us right now, and folks listening on YouTube don't even need to go to those sites today.
You know what? Can we just stop the show right now and I can just give up for the rest of the week?
Absolutely not, Brad. I will not let you do that. Billie Jean, which is spelled differently than the Michael Jackson song, knows that you go through hard times once in a while, Brad. And then we bounce back. People are listening to us now. You'll get the websites back up and running in no time, Brad. And you know what? In the grand scheme of things, when you hear what story number 3 is, Brad, you're going to realize that something like a website domain being down really isn't that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things.
Well, it is if you're in our industry, but that's a whole other story. Okay. Man, you just made my day. I wish you did you know about that yesterday?
Yeah, but Brad, you couldn't even do the show yesterday. I'm not going to text you and tell you that the domains are down.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to me yesterday. I'll be honest with you. At one point in time, it was like I was running like 5 quarts low in blood. And, I had this crazy weird, I felt like I had stomach flu. I think I might have had something bad to eat. You ever get like the crazy weird food poisoning kind of stuff?
Yeah, I have had that before, Brad. And I know that's terrible.
I feel I got better last night. I went through like 18 hours of like sort of hell. And I got better last night, and I feel like on a 1 to 10 scale this morning, I'm like about a 6. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like
that's not too bad, Brad.
I'm vertical. I'm moving around, but still. But then,
yeah, you were ambulatory. You were up and around. And if it is a little bit of a silver lining, Brad, I know that the streaming is working right now because I know at least one listener who just texted who said that the streaming is working. So they save the streaming link, which isn't dependent on bjshow.co or egbert.com.
Okay, tell you what, let's just go ahead and we'll jump right into the meat of the first segment, which is John Combest, Combest. He puts this website together. He's done it for 22 plus years, every single day, never misses a day, never has his website go down, never has any problems, never goes off the air, never has any technical difficulties. He's an amazing guy, and I'm not. We start off with the third most popular thing. This is according to John, and we bring this guy along, and his name is...
I'm Casey.
And we start with...
In third place...
And a much more serious issue than a couple domains having some glitches, Brad. A woman back in 1998 lived in University City. She was a Post-Dispatch reporter, and her name was Felicia. And Felicia Gayle, let's say her name. As advocates say, Brad, say her name. Felicia Gayle. She was showering upstairs. She heard a commotion. She called out to see if anybody was there. She heard nothing. And then she came downstairs, Brad, and a gentleman had broken into her house. He took one of her butcher knives, and he stabbed her 43 times. He inflicted 7 fatal wounds, including, according to authorities, he twisted the knife once it was inside of her neck, just to make sure that she died. His name was Marcellus Williams, and he is scheduled to be executed next Wednesday. We haven't talked about this on the show, Brad, but the execution, of course, like any execution in Missouri, is controversial. You have folks who are morally opposed to the death penalty. Then you have kind of the, I don't know, we could call them the didn't do nothing crowd, where you insist that every conviction is racist. In this case, by the way, Marcellus Williams had a jury of 11 white people, Brad. How disgusting is that, to face a jury of 11 white people and one black guy? But anyway, Brad, Marcellus Williams is scheduled to be executed on Wednesday. Now, some groups have come out, as you might imagine, and say that Marcellus should not be, but I should say his name correctly. Actually, he has changed his name in jail to Khalifa. His new name is Khalifa. Khalifa should not be executed. There was a big event yesterday hosted by the Mid-Missouri Democratic Socialists of America. So that probably tells you something. And the governor, of course, intends on going through with this execution. I would point out something, Brad, before we discuss this. I would point out something that is often overlooked, and is overlooked so often and never pointed out by mainstream media, that I often link to either an old Post-Dispatch story or a Wikipedia, and I've done that today. Governor Mike Parson has executed, I should say, under his administration, 11 men have been executed. He still trails good old grandfatherly Governor Bob Holden, who under his watch executed 15 people. Jay Nixon and the Jay Nixon administration's 21 people were executed. And these all pale in comparison to the patron saint of the modern Democratic Party, Mel Taxman Carnahan, who had 38 people executed over 2 terms. So Governor Parson on the leaderboard is really trailing a lot of Democratic icons. So, Brad, Marcellus Williams scheduled to assume room temperature in the brutal stabbing and murder of Felicia Gayle.
Now, I've read stuff about this. He's still claiming he didn't do it. He had nothing to do with it.
Oh, yeah, of course. He a good boy. He didn't do nothing.
Well, and there were some pretty damning evidences, if I'm not mistaken, from the trial, wasn't there?
Yeah, he had blood all over him. He admitted to the crimes. His girlfriend opened his trunk at one point, Brad, in his Buick LeSabre, which he stole from his grandfather that day. And he had a bloody clothes in his backpack. He had the stolen laptop, which he stole from Felicia Gayle's house. He had all the evidence on him. But as the Columbia Missourian very helpfully points out, some of the people who testified against him, Brad, some of the people who testified against him were essentially jailhouse snitches as well, because Marcellus talked to a lot of them about how he committed the crime and et cetera. But evidence be damned, Brad. Now, once again, this is another example, Brad. You've seen this for longer than I have. There are people who have moral and philosophical opposition to the death penalty, no matter, when in a case like this where the murderer is clearly guilty. They still oppose it because they say it's not, blood for, an eye for an eye, a limb for a limb, tooth for a tooth is not the way to go through our justice system. But then there are people who will see evidence and say he's got to be innocent because the jury was white and this guy's black.
It is interesting because of the fact that I remember this case, and like you said, there was tremendous evidence against him. I mean, it was to the point where it wasn't circumstantial evidence; it was hardcore evidence. And I would imagine they probably did. I don't know. Back in the day, did they do DNA testing and all that kind of stuff on it as well too?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that the folks who were opposing this say, that there isn't DNA evidence. I know that, for example, if you want to follow this, and I think it's telling that even like a Wesley Bell has not successfully challenged this. Jane Dueker tweets about this case frequently when people are chirping at her about it. So she lays out a lot of the evidence in her tweets as well.
Right, and she's pretty much to the point of the same conclusion that he was, as far as the evidence had a, what they call, preponderance of evidence for his guilt.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right.
And I would just suggest people go to my website today and check out the Murderpedia entry that lays out all of the evidence that's there.
Okay, moving on to 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Something that was at the center of a viral video, if you could call it that, Brad. Remember when Josh Hawley confronted his Democratic opponent? Remember that at the state fair, Brad?
Yes.
It was all about debates. And as it turns out, looks like there's a resolution. Josh Hawley will actually do an on-stage debate, and it's going to take place on Halloween, Brad. So how appropriate is that? You get Josh Hawley running up the score, and gosh, after story number 3, we probably shouldn't use violent terms here, but on Halloween, on October 31st, Josh Hawley will face his Democratic opponent. The election has been over. The election was never actually, up for debate of if Hawley was going to get reelected. It will be a matter of what his margin is now. I would point people to a link that I have today, Brad, from The Guardian in the UK that has a Washington bureau, and they go through all the competitive U.S. Senate races, of which Missouri is not listed. And then they also list the dark horse races where candidates might have an outside shot of winning. And Missouri is not listed there either. So the good news is, Brad, maybe finally both sides can stop posturing about when they'll get on stage and debate, because we know it'll be Halloween Day.
Okay, I saw an ad for Kunce the other day, and I didn't realize they identified him as Lieutenant Colonel Kunce of the Marines. Is he still active duty, or is he reserve, or what is he retired?
I don't know. I haven't invested any time in really learning about that. I know he's going to have a lot more time after November too, and Lucas Kunce is going to be fine. Like, he'll get a job with some, progressive, military type. Whatever. He'll be able to go back to D.C. and, third time is a charm for Missouri. Lucas Kunce will lose 3 elections, and he'll be fine. He'll be able to make a nice living. I think that there are definitely people who will want to hire Lucas Kunce. I think it's clear he has a really bright mind. I mean, he's an Ivy League intellectual. He's going to get a great job. Don't shed any tears for Lucas Kunce. He's wasting everyone's time with this U.S. Senate race. And this will be his 3rd loss, but he'll be fine after this election.
Which reminds me, maybe we'll talk about this at the end of this segment, or maybe in the B block, but I heard an interesting thing. Someone sent me an interesting thing about Bill Eichel the other day, which I never mentioned. Anyway, let's move on to, last but not least,
the number 1.
This will cheer you up as your body is ravaged by whether it's food poisoning or a strange disease from China, Brad. I think this one will cheer you up because I want you to answer a multiple choice question, and I think you're going to get this right. Okay. I'm going to read you a quote, and then I'm going to give you 3 choices of who said it. Here's the quote, Brad. We all hate it. My friends cry every day. Is that number 1, a listener to the Brad and John show? Number 2, a St. Louis Cardinals season ticket holder? Or number 3, a grown man who works at a local Amazon facility?
Number 1?
Correct. Ding, 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 ding. Again, the quote is, we all hate it. My friends cry every day. Actually, Brad, we know that's probably listeners to the show, but also it's a direct quote from a St. Louis public radio piece about Amazon workers. This is yet another big event. Unions go out to Amazon. They try to agitate the workers. They eventually want to do all the unionization stuff. St. Louis Public Radio, and a guy who's a really good reporter out there, Jonathan Ahl, who we've talked about before. He was originally based out of Rolla. He may still be based out of Rolla. And he has this piece up for St. Louis Public Radio. A gentleman who works in the Sauget facility was at the event and was complaining about how hard it is to work in a warehouse. And he says, quote, Amazon is awful on my body. We all hate it. My friends cry every day, Brad. And now the gist of it, and the reason why this is newsworthy, is because Amazon has announced pay increases of at least $22 an hour for base pay nationally. Now, the workers in St. Louis, Brad, were making a big stink, and the unions turned out, according to both the Post-Dispatch and the St. Louis Public Radio piece, the unions turned out 75 people. So that's not too bad for a union rally. But these workers want $25 an hour, Brad. And the real injustice is there's some people out there who are making only a little bit over $19 an hour, Brad. How on earth can a company like Amazon justify only paying people $19 an hour? Do you have an answer for that, Brad?
John, I've got a couple different aspects here. First off, I know 3 people who, one of still is working, 2 others have worked at Amazon. One is a woman who in her upper 60s, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, worked there because she wanted to get in better shape. And I think she worked there like 5 or 6 months. And being that she's a grandmother and had grandmotherly duties, she decided she didn't want to do it anymore. Not that she didn't. But I've asked all 3 of these people about this. I go, okay, there's all this hubbub about the Amazon facility out there in St. Peter's. And all 3 of them have said, we don't have any problems. I mean, all 3 of them have said, yeah, it's and they've all said in one way or another, hey, you're working in a warehouse. It's not a cakewalk. You know what I mean? It's to the point where, it's not like sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day pushing paper all day long. And the other thing that I always bring up is I saw part of this. I was watching part of the Channel 5 newscast last night, and they had an interview, and they had a guy out there. They interview a guy, and he's going into the thing. Well, it's terrible when you get a notice that your car's going to be repossessed and your house is going to be foreclosed on. And I'm going like, dude, you knew going into the job that if you were able to, use any kind of a calculator, that if you have X amount of income, you know what I mean? You do the numbers and you say, okay, can I make it on a monthly basis? No, I can't. So what do you do? You say, okay, maybe I need to take a second job. Maybe the wife needs to get a job. Maybe we need to, if our car's going to get repossessed, maybe we need to sell it and buy a beater. You know what I mean? I mean, it's to the point.
I know exactly what you mean, Brad.
And
the gentleman, one of the gentlemen who said that he and his friends cry every day, his quote is, he says that it's, quote, kind of like being an indentured servant. Now, I don't know if you were doing a seance, Brad, with some slaves. I think they probably wouldn't compare working in an air-conditioned Amazon warehouse to, I don't know, working in the fields. I could be wrong.
Okay, can I say one other thing? And I think I can say this now because my son no longer works for Amazon. My son, who's the brilliant electrical engineer, computer science major who takes after his mother, certainly doesn't take after me because he's super smart. He worked a summer intern job at Garmin for 2 years, and then literally the Monday after his graduation, he had a job. I mean, I moved him on his graduation day. Him and his wife, he got married when he was in college. Him and his wife moved him on graduation day, which was a Saturday. They got their apartment all straightened out in Lenexa, Kansas on a Sunday, and on Monday he started work. Well, then he's a highly recruited guy. He's been recruited by all these companies. He got recruited by Amazon, and he got recruited by a division of Amazon that makes the robots for the warehouse. So he and once again, this was his job, and they moved him up to Boston. It was some company that Amazon actually bought that he actually technically worked for that company, but it was a subsidiary at that point in time of Amazon. And part of his job was he would work in the warehouse because they wanted him to get a feel for, not one of these things where, well, it worked great in the lab, but it didn't work in the warehouse kind of thing. They wanted to get a feel for what the warehouse environment was, how things went. And I asked him about this, and I go, was it like working in hell? And he goes, no. He says, it was like working in a warehouse. But the interesting part of it was, part of his job was, they were doing more and more and more automation in the warehouse, so they would have to hire less and less people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that was his job, to essentially replace warm bodies, because he said there were 2 problems that Amazon brought up. That A, they had a tough time finding people to work in the warehouses because it was tough. And B, the people in the warehouse were never happy with what they were doing. So
and I would this is top of mind too, Brad. So for folks who don't follow Greg Keller on Twitter, you should go to Greg Keller. A couple of days ago, 3 days ago, Greg tweeted, there's a story about Chipotle and how they're dealing with these ridiculous demands for higher wages. And it's a really cool video that shows how they can make salad bowls and rice bowls with a little robot, because that's how you handle the increased cost of labor, right? And the bowls look awesome. And you know what? Probably way more accurate and cost efficient in terms of use of resources than having a human being who's going to whine and complain and pretend to have, quote, COVID, unquote, all the time and demand higher wages. So it's a great example, Brad. We have automation. We probably should have more automation. Now, the other thing I would point out here quickly is there's a photo gallery from the Post-Dispatch, and there's a woman, the union has these pre-made signs where they can give a little bit of direction to the workers and they can fill out a message. The sign says, the pre-made part says, I'm fighting for $25 at Amazon because, and there's a white woman named Chantel, which that has to be something. She's got to be the only woman in America that's white named Chantel. And she filled it out and said she's fighting for Amazon because, quote, I can. And then it says, and because I'm worth it. Well, guess what, sweetie? If you're worth it, go over to the Cisco warehouse where they haul food from pallets onto trucks. Maybe you can make $25 there. Maybe you can go somewhere else and make $25. This is like a relationship, Brad. If you don't like it, hit the door. Go explore other options. You want something else? You want $25 an hour? If you're, quote, worth it, sweetie, hit the door and see if you can get it elsewhere.
I had a discussion with a friend of mine just last week who's and once again, I'm not anti-union. I've been in the union. I've been in the American Federation of Television Radio Artists, and IBW, the whole bit. And this particular person was saying the livable wage thing. I said, well, I got a solution to the whole thing, just $100 an hour. And they went, well, that's ridiculous. And I go, well, why is that ridiculous? They want a livable wage. $100 an hour is a damn fine livable wage. If you made $100 an hour, you would be doing very well for yourself. Well, that's ridiculous. I go, well, where's the line? Tell me where the line between...
Where's the line? That's the question, Brad.
Ridiculous and what it should be. Because the fact that to me, it's like, okay, it's like... anyway.
Here's where we find the line, though, Brad. Whatever the salary is, it needs to be at a point where it doesn't make a grown man and his friends cry every day. Now, if they cry every other day, that seems to be a livable wage, Brad. Stop making men cry, Brad.
Okay, John, we have to move on.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?